Okay, we're learning this evening Lil Nishmas, my father-in-law, David ben Eliezer, whose yahrzeit was today, and Ruvain ben Yeshua, whose yahrzeit is tonight. That's the father of Adir Rabbi Avi. So Ruvain ben Yeshua Neshama should have an Aliyah. So we're up to the Perek Bayis for Aliyah, and we're speaking about people who had a duplex. We're speaking about a person who rented it out, one to the other. We saw some halachas. Now we're going to see another Mishnah regarding this duplex. So the Mishnah is going to begin on Kuf Tes Zayin Amid Beis. Kuf Tes Zayin Amid Beis. For those interested, Steve did post Kuf Tes Zayin recently. So if you want to make up last night, it's available. Abayis v'aliyah nifsacha aliyah. So now the aliyah, the floor of the aliyah was nifchas, and there's a hole in it, and the ein balabayis sorts l'takein. In other words, it's not livable. It's not livable. It's not that there's just a hole there, and it's not livable. And the balabayis, meaning the one who lives below, he doesn't want to fix it. Hari bala aliyah, the bal aliyah yoyreid, he can go vidor limata and go live in the other guy's house. Actually, aliyah until he goes Edward and he fixes his aliyah. Now we'll see exactly what the case is talking about. What was the terms of the lease? And it would depend upon the terms of the lease whether he's able to live there or not. But regardless, this is what the Mishnah says, that he's able to do that. The tachton, to fix it, he gives the tikra, which is the support. We'll see, the support matter, be it beams or reeds or whatever that is. And vo'elyoin es hama'aziva. And the Elyon provides the cement or the type of pitch on top. So according to Rabbi Yossi, the bottom one is the bottom guy is going to provide the floor, and the Rabbi Yossi, in our understanding, and the upper guy is going to provide like the carpet, the covering of the floor, and that's Rabbi Yossi. Tanakam is mashma that the guy on bottom also has to provide the mazima. So we'll see that's machlokes. Why the Tanakama holds that the bottom guy has to provide the maziva, the covering, and Rabbi Yossi holds it's on the top guy. Now, when it says there was a hole there, how much is a hole to say that the guy can go down? So Nifsra B'Kama, Rav Amma Beruba. Rav says it's got to be the majority of the floor. Majority of the floor, not just a little hole, the majority of the floor, a person will be able to go ahead and go live below. Shmuel Amar Be'arbot Fachim. The 4 tefachim would do the job. So Shmuel is being machmer over here. Even if you have a hole of 4 tefachim, which is not a tremendous amount, if this is a tefach, 4 of those, nonetheless, you will be able to leave your apartment on top and go live with the guy below, or even object. We'll see. Rav Amam Beruba, Aval Ba'arba Loi, Dafka Roiv, and not Arba, because Adam Dor B'chetzev Lamata, B'chetzev Lamaila. A person can go ahead and live half above and half below. Pirish. If I live above, and I have a space that I lost because there was a hole of 4 tefachim, I can go ahead and use 4 tefachim of the balabayis's apartment below. Adam gar bilmayla ulemata. So since he holds you can live up here and up there, so Mamela 4 tefachim is not going to do the job to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going down living with you, because 4 tefachim he can go ahead and take the space below. Therefore, you need roiv. Because what Adam Dor Chetzev Lamata, half below the Chetzev Lamaila. Ushmulama no ba'arba, ain't Adam Dor Chetzev Lamata Chetzev Lamaila. No, this arrangement is not good for me. If I want the whole area, and 4 tefachim is machum chashiv, and therefore once you get to that amount, that area 4 tefachim, then I don't want to live below. It's not normal to live below, and therefore you have to fix it. If you don't fix it, I can live down with you totally. Hechidanu. Now, what exactly was the lease agreement? Idu Amar Aliyazu, if a guy said this aliyah, Azda, you got bad luck. In other words, I rented you this aliyah. This aliyah is gone. I don't have to make that up. Azda, Rashi says, Masel, you're gone. Ela do Amalei, you must say aliyah stam. So he rented him an aliyah. So says the Gemara, why does he go ahead and have to live below with him? Loiger le'achrita. If you rented him an attic, so it could be in another attic in the city. It doesn't have to be this attic. So Mamanashach. If you said Ali Yazu, this attic no longer is there, tough luck. If you said attic stam, then why dafka do you have to go ahead and say, well, you don't have to repair this attic and say below. I could live in any attic that you'd have to provide for me. So I'm a Rava, like shani, right? And this aliyah that I am going ahead and renting to you, hisolka solik bahada. When you go literally, and the lashon, when you go up, you go up. So in other words, he says to him, this attic that I'm going to go ahead and rent to you, hisolka. Again, this is I guess the terms of the agreement that he said to him that when it goes up, you go with it, and when it goes down, you go down with it. So when it's up, you live in it, and when it's down, you're out. Says Mari Hachi, my remember. So what's the chiddush? As if he told him that this attic, as long as it's there, it's yours. You're going to live in it. So in other words, so what's the chiddush that the guy above can go into the balabas below if he doesn't make it up? That was exactly the agreement that as long he has to provide for him. So Ella Amar Rav Ashi a different chiddush, and it's a very fine-tuned chiddush. The Amar later following. He says, Aliyah zu shal gabe bayazeh. I'm renting you this aliyah that's on top of this house. So what is he doing? Ani maskulecha, the hashabed bei la aliyah. As a result of this, he's being mishabed the aliyah to the house below. So he's saying, I'm renting you this aliyah on this house, and by saying on this house, he's mishabed an aliyah on this house. So the aliyah is mishabed to the house. And where do you find such an idea that works? Barav Ada Bar Amar Yitzchak, Ma'aseh be'echad shomel lechaveiroi, dolis shal gabe parsek zeh ani moich lecha. I'm selling you this vine that's on top of a peach tree. So the peach tree is the support for the vine, similar to the house below being a support for the aliyah, the attic. Vinasa parsek, and the Ma'aseh be'echad shomel lechaveiroi, the ne'ekara parsek, and the peach tree gets uprooted. So does he have to provide a new support for the vine? You have to go ahead and get another peach tree for him. As long as the vine is around. As long as the vine is around, you have to do it. So as long as this house is around, you're going to have to provide an attic for him. So that's the Metzia's other case. So going over the Mishnah, we have a case where the Mishnah, the upper floor fell in. According to Rav, it has to be Raiv. According to Shmuel, it's even 4 tefachim. And it's speaking where the lease stated that I'm renting you this aliyah that's on top of this house. Boy, Rav Abba Mamamo. Rav Abba Mamamo asked the following questions. Amid Aleph, he asked the following question. Kishehu Dar. Now, you're telling me he moves in below. So what's the deal? Kishudar levadai hudar kidemei kara. In other words, he goes in and the balabas leaves. He goes in and the balabas leaves. Ideal mishneim darin, or maybe they both live there together. They both live in the lower apartment. The amalei adaite lafkinan loy agri lecha. On the das that you're going to take me out of the apartment, I can go ahead and rent it to you. So the svara to say that he lives alone, and the bottom balabas has to leave if he doesn't fit the attic, is just like you rented me an attic and I lived alone. I'm going to be living downstairs alone. Or no, the balabas can say, I rented it to you, but I didn't rent it to you on gabi in my house, right? On smach that that I have to leave. There's no reason that I didn't go. Intim Suleiman. And if you're going to say Shneim Dorim Boy, that they both live it together, Dov Kufyat Zayin Amid Aleph, 3 lines down. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to say Shneim Dorim Boy, Kishu Mishnamish, when now it seems, fellas, when we think of the Aliyah, we think of like, well, you go in a door and you go up. So it seems to be that to get to the Aliyah, there seemed to be had nothing to do with the lower apartment. So it had to be that there was a ladder on the outside or some way that he would go up. So here's the question. when they live together, does he have to go in the same way he went in with the aliyah, which is up? Says the Gemara, Imtim Salem Mishneim Darimba, Kushum Mishtamish Derech Pesachim, when he's Mishtamish Derech Pesachim, Mishtamish, he goes in the front door the same way as the Balabas goes in the front door, or Derech Gagim Mishtamish, or he has to go in from the roof. Just like by the aliyah, he was on top of the house, so now he goes in, he has to be on top of the house. Right. Do we say he goes into the apartment the same way initially when there was an addict? Just like derech meikari, there was a gag. Hashtana derech gagin also now. Or perhaps the Baal Aliyah can say, Aliyah kibil elai, to go up. I did go ahead and accept upon myself. Aliyah v'yirida like kibil elai. Pirish. When I lived in the duplex above, all I had to do was go up. Now you're telling me I'm living below, so I'm going to have to go up and go down? So no. So in other words, those are the two studying to the shaila. If they're living together, does he go through the roof similar to when he alone, when he lived up there? Or no? He could say to him, when I lived there alone, I just went up. Now I have to go up and go down? That I wasn't makabel. Imtim Sulaim and Matzia, if you're going to tell me, Aliyah v'yarida like kibla alai, I was not makabel in Aliyah, I was not makabel Yerida. Shtei Aliyah is al gabzu. You have a triplex, you have a triplex over here. You have two Aliyahs, guys. Mahu. If sik Elyoina, if the upper one, the third floor broke in, Nachis v'dar b'tachtoina, he lives in the second one. If kis tachtoina mahu, lemesalik legami be'elyoina. Mi amin and damalei, Shem Aliyah kabilas alach. I was a kabbalah Aliyah, and therefore can I force him to go up? In other words, can you have over here you have a triple. You have a triple. You have two aliyahs, one on top of the other, right? And now the ritzbah of the aliyah it came in. Can the balabas go ahead and remove the guy, because he can say to him, Be'el Yoina, you can't use my house. You can, right? Can I say to you, Damalei Shem Aliyah Kabilas Alach, and there I was makabel upon myself in Aliyah, so I can provide you with the second floor, not the the third floor breaks in. You're not going to come live with me on the. Can you say, listen, I gave you an Aliyah, right? Right. I gave you an Aliyah, right? I gave you an Aliyah. So the question is, like, if I give you an Aliyah, then I can give you the second floor, which is an Aliyah. Dilma chad Aliyah kibul alai. The guy, I guess you know what? One Aliyah I was makabel. Shtei Aliyahs like kibul alai. I was not makabel what that two Aliyahs. I wasn't makabel to go up. I'm not sure. A second. I thought I understood this. 1 second. Let me try again. I guess they wanted to go to the third floor. Excuse me. So, guys, here's the story. The second floor breaks. Right? Now, can the owner who's living on floor number 1 tell him, listen, I was able to rent you an aliyah. Floor 2, go up to floor 3. It's an aliyah. Or no, he could tell him, I was makabel only the second floor, I wasn't makabel the third floor. That would be, and the Gemara remains, Heku, the Gemara remains what? As a Shaila, that Tishvi, Yitaris Kushas Abayas. Rabbi Yossi said that the guy below gives the tikra, and the upper one gives the ma'aziva. The guy above gives the ma'aziva. My tikra, what is the tikra? In other words, what does he provide? My tikra, what exactly is he providing? When it says, what is he providing? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, names are important, guys. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina Amar, Kinim usanoyim. Kinim are reeds, sanoyim are thorns. So I guess you picture, before you put cement, you need some type of base. So this would be the base, some reeds and thorns. Usatini Amar, Usatini Amar Reb Ben Lakish. Rashi says Satini Shem Chacham. Satini is the shame of a Chacham, right? Levachim, it's planks. Rashi says they're planks of wood, planks of cedar wood. So This happens to be very, very fascinating because I read this Gemara wrong, and this is going to be major bloggable material. I read this Gemara like this. I read Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina Amar, Kinim usanoyim usatini. Right? I read that as one of as a material. And I read it as a material. And Rashi says, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says it's the shame of a chacham. Rashi says that it's the shame of a person. Usatini reish lakish, shame chacham, talmud shereish lakish. So I thought it was very, very odd. Anyway, this the sefer, it's called the Aruch. It's a sefer called the Aruch, and the Aruch, he says something fascinating. He says, why in the world would one name their kid Satan? Satini. Guys, it sounds like Satan. Why in the world would you? So he's Gairis Tini. He's Gairis Tina. The gifts that he had, Tina means like cement. It means like lime. And therefore, Reish Lakish is the one who said boards, and it's taka like the mistake I made. It was Kinim, Sanoyim, and Tinim, and Visatinim. So it's fascinating that this the question of this person's name really is my mistake. Turned out to be, at least according to the Aruch, not such a mistake. Not such a mistake. I thought it was fascinating. Okay. Anyway, says the Gemara Vaita. Veloy pligi, and they're not arguing what exactly the tikra has to apply. Maki asrei. In the place of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, it was kinim v'sanoyim, and the place of Rav Shimon, it was what it was. It was lavachim. It was planks. Hanu beitrei. There were these two people. Tavi dari, chari loy v'chat hatoy. They were living together, one above, one below. And ifkes me'aziva, and there was a hole in the maziva. And kimasha maya yiloi, right? Azul maske litatoy, when he would wash himself, wash his hands, or whatever, he would go ahead and the water would go down, and it would go ahead and damage the lower floor. So there was a hole, and as the water would go in, it would. We'll see whether directly on the floor or on the floor and through the hole, directly in the hole. We'll see later on, and it would damage the bottom. So now, Reb Chia bar Abba Amar, names are important. Reb Chia bar Abba Amar, ha'elyoin mitaking. It's up to the elyoin to be mitaking. Now, guys, let's call the elyoin the mazik. Who's damaging who? The upper guy is damaging the bottom guy. So going back to our Baba Kama days, right? Going back to our Baba Kama days, the upper guy would be the mazik, and the lower guy would be the nizik, the one gets damaged. Yeah. So who has to fix this? Who has to fix this hole? Okay, now. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar ha'elyon mitaken, Rabbi Loi mishum Rabbi Chia bar Yosi Amar hatachton mitaken. It's on the bottom one. So we have two Rabbi Chias over here. One bar Abba says elyon, and Rabbi Chia bar Yosi says tachton. So the siman, and the siman to remember who is who, because you might make a mistake. After all, they sound similar. Chia bar Abba, Chia bar Yosef. Their first names are the same. So the Sefer Idaris tells us in this case, since both names are the same, it requires a siman. What's the siman? The Yosef, which is similar to Yosef, Hored Mitzrayma. Right? So Hored means he went down. So Yosef Hored Mitzrayma. So Reb Chia bar Yosef, he's the one who says it's upon the lower one. It's upon the lower one. That's the chiddush over here. Now, Lema, Reb Chia bar Abu says the upper one. Rabbi Loi, who was said in the name of Reb Chia bar Yosef, said the lower one. The plukta the Reb Yosef Rabbana Kmifliki. They depend upon Machloikas Reb Yosef Rabbana. Now, we're going to see a Machloikas in a second in a Mishnah in Baba Basra, a Mishnah in Baba Basra. Who has to go ahead and distance? Lamanda Amar Elyoin, right? The Elyoin Mitakein. Kasavar ala mazik laharchetza atzmai min anizik. The mazik has to distance himself from the nizik. So Loi Reb Chia bar Abba, the upper person would have to fix it. He's the mazik. Uman the Amar tachtay mitakein, and the one the Amar who says below mitakein, that's Reb Chia bar Reb Yosi. He would say ala nizik laharchetza atzmai. Since it's the nizik who has to go ahead and fix it, it's upon him. Min mazik. Good. So now it would come out, if that's the explanation of a Mishnah, that Rav Chia bar Rabbi Yossi says below, says it's on the nizik to distance himself, correct? If that's the hezbollah, guys, the names are important. Again, upper nizik, bottom mazik. Yosef is below. So Yosef would say, if he has to fix it, the nizik has to distance himself. Fred the Gemara of Tizbra, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbana, Linyan Niske, Nisikin, are the arguing Linyan Nisikin? We heard the opposite. Did none. And this is the Mishnah in Baba Basra. Marchikin esa ilan min habar. Now, you have a tree, the tree is going to grow, the roots are going to spread out, and they're going to go ahead and weaken the sides of the bar, and the bar is going to be ruined, and people would store water in bars. So therefore, who has the distance? Now, in this case, the Elon is the mazik, and the bar is the nizik. So Marchikin esa ilan min habar, esrim v'chamesh ama, 25 amis, u'bechruv v'shikma, and if it's a carob tree or a sycamore tree, chamishim ama, they have very strong, deep roots, and there will be 50 amas. Beimil Maila, whether the tree is above, Beimin outside from the side. Im habar kadim, if the bar comes first, kaitzeitz v'nais and damim, then you have to cut down your tree and pay him, and he pay him for the tree. If im ilan kadim, why does he have to pay him for the tree? I don't know. Im ilan kadim lo yikaitz, but if the ilan came first, then you don't have to cut it down. Suffix kadim, the suffix whether the tree came first or the bar came first, lo yikaitz, you don't cut it down at all. Rabbi Yossi Aimer, now, Rabbi Yossi says, Afa pisha bar koidem es le'ilon, lo yikaitz, even if the bar comes first, you don't cut down the tree. Shezeh chayfe b'tayich shaloi, but zeh not the b'tayich shaloi. So what do you see? Now, each one did their own thing. There's no din of the nizik being marchik, no din of the masik being marchik. Alma, Rabbi Yosef Savar, ala nizik lahachik es atzmoi, Ravanan Savi ala masik lahachik es atzmoi. So this Mishnah in Baba Basra, right? This Mishnah in Baba Basra is speaking what all the Indian is seeking, but not here. Here we're not speaking Indian is seeking. We wanted to tzushtel the din of Masik and Nisik to our Mishnah, to the not the Mishnah, the case of the water going in, and saying that what, and saying that it depends upon Nisik and Masik. But l'chayr, they're not arguing over there because Rabbi Yossi himself said over there. It's on the masik to be the nisik, the masik to be marchik, not the nisik. Good. So therefore, it can't be machlokes in Rabbi Yossi Rabbanon. You wanted to say, guys, look at the second line where it gets wide. Rabbi plugged the Rabbi Yossi Rabbanon. Now, what does Rabbi Yossi hold? Rabbi Yossi holds that he says that it doesn't depend the nisik. The nisik. Rabbi Yossi says it's the nisik has to distance himself. But according to us, according to the way you want to explain it, it's the Rabbi Yossi is explaining the svara of the masik. So therefore, it can't be dependent upon that at all. They're arguing the machlokes between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbanan, the hasam kamifliki. So in other words, einachinami, the machlokes, whether it be marchik or the Yosef Rabbanon, is the machlokes in Baba Basra, the Hasam Kamifki, and they're arguing in that. So the svara of the Baba Kama the svara of if the svara of the Nizik and Mazik, that we're going to apply to the Mishnah in not our case over here in Baba Metzia, but rather the case there in Baba Basra. So what exactly, therefore, is the machlokes over here? If the machlokes over here is not the Nisik and the Masik, what's the machlokes that Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi says the top guy, and Rabbi Yossi says the bottom guy? The hacha over here b'may kamiflagi, b'choizik tikra kamiflagi. Whether who has to strengthen the tikra. Look at the top Rashi, wide line. The chayzik tikra, she'ena tachten soyik, she'ena chosh lameima. He's not crying about the water whatsoever. Eloha elyon soyik v'oimer, kishani doirich ala nesarim. When I walk on the planks, hey minanin, they shake. Vani doig, and I'm worried. Shemet hafech echad mehem tachtoi. One of them is going to go ahead and is one of them is going to go ahead and fall down underneath me. Or it'll go ahead, it'll slip off the beam, and I'll fall. In other words, so he's worried about that. So who has to go ahead and fix if it's a shaky floor, who has to fix it? That's the machlokes. So now, Rabbanan Savri Ma'aziva Achsuke Tikrahu. Putting down the cement is considered being machzik the tikra. Achsuke Tikra ala tachton oil achsuke. And that's on the bottom guy. Rabbi Yossi Savar, in other words, who's mechayiv to fix the floor, to strengthen the floor? The bottom guy. So if the purpose of the maziva is to go ahead and strengthen the floor, that's the svara of Rabbi Chia Rabbi Yossi that the bottom guy has to do it. What about the svara of the top guy? And that's Rabbi Chia bar Abba Savar, right? Rabbi Yossi Savar me'aziva ashvei gumesu. Maziva is being ashvei gumes. Ashvei gumes ala elyoin ashvuye. So ashvei gumes is not on the bottom guy; it's on the top guy. Meaning ashvei gumes means to level off. You should have a level floor. So that's really the machlokes. Okay. Ashi kiavina be'Rav Kahana havyaminan moed Rabbi Yossi begiri delay. You said above that Rabbi Yossi holds that if the nizik has to go away, right? That the nizik has to distance himself. Rabbi Yossi says it's upon the nizik to distance himself. You know when that is? If you plant a tree and the tree is going to grow and it's going to damage, so the nizik has to go away. So what happens if the damage happened immediately? Remember the sugya guys, Eishay Misham Kitziav, Eishay Misham Emoinoi? This chiyav of Eish, is it like throwing an arrow, or is it like a chiyav money? So we said that even Rabbi Shlakish is Moed, it's a chiyav Kitziav. We said in Daf Beis in Baba Kama. So you're taking this water and you're throwing it directly down. So how can you tell me that it's above the bottom guy has to do it? It's a direct masik. If it's a direct masik, even Rabbi Yossi says the masik has to distance himself. You're learning pshat the Rabbi Yossi that Rabbi Yossi says the nizik has to distance himself. It's true. That's when it's not direct. But when it's direct, then he holds the masik has to distance himself. So how can this be the svara of the case of the water in the upper deck? On that, the Gemara says, "Moed Rabbi Yossi begiri delay." And the Gemara the paske maya v'hodanafli. It must be there's some way. I think I'm not sure this is the correct pshat, but it will make sense to me. If you take the water, throw it directly down the hole, and it does damage, that would be considered direct. If it goes first on the floor and then drips down, then it would be indirect, because it had the fact that it was on the floor first and then it went down. Perhaps that's the pshat. Again, the svara being it's not direct damage. It's what we call grama, what we call causative damage, which we've been speaking about throughout Shas. Okay, the bottom line is that the machlokes in our Mishnah has nothing to do with the nizik and the mazik. The machlokes in our Mishnah, who has to fix it up, has to do with being mechazik the tikra or not. Who's being mechazik the tikra or not? Says the Mishnah. Habayis v'aliyah shel shnayim shenaflu. The bias of aliyah of two people that fall in. Amma bal aliyah lebal abayis libnois. Now, over here, there's no rental over here, guys. The previous case was a rental. Here's not a rental. It's two fellas, that could be two brothers. They inherited the first Rashi in the parak. They inherited it, and now one lives above and one lives below, and the house falls in. Obviously, the Baal Aliyah wants the Baal Tachton to build it so he can build on top of that. So what happens over here? I'm a Baal Aliyah leBaal Abayis, live nice, build, and then I'll build on top of you. Who ain't a right to live nice? And he doesn't want to build. So what's the halacha? Says the Tanakama, Hari Baal Aliyah boine es habayis. The Baal Aliyah, he builds the bias. The Baal Aliyah, he builds the bias. Vidor b'seicha, and he lives in the bias. In other words, the guy who lives on top builds the bottom, and he lives in the bottom. Now the guy from the bottom will give him his expenditures. He'll now then live in the bottom, and the guy on top, using that money, will build on top. So it's a way of what? Of forcing his hand. It's sort of a way of forcing his hand. You don't want to build the bottom floor? I'll build it and I'll live in it. That's what the Tanakama says, which makes a lot of sense. Except Rabbi Yehuda doesn't like it. Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's a problem because you're living in your friend's rishus, right? It's zenena v'zelei chaser. You're having hana by living in this guy's rishus, zelei chaser, because he's not paying anything, and it's no sweat off his back. And Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion zenena v'zelei chaser l'chayre is you can't do it. So Rabbi Yehuda therefore avzed dor b'toy shel chaveiroi sarach lahalei schar. Even this person who's living in his friend will have to pay him. They'd have to pay him wages, or else it would be zen and v'zelei chaser. Ella balaliyah boines habayis v'esaliyah. He builds both, right? Umikra esal yoina v'yoshev habayis achitin esyitzir. He builds both, and then he sits below in the lower one until the other guy pays his way in. He sits below in the lower one until the other guy pays his way in. So he builds the house, umikora esal aliyah. Then he goes ahead and he puts up a floor of the aliyah, the yoshev b'bayis, and he lives there until the balabayis goes ahead and gives him his wages and figures in the wages. Says Rashi, umikora esal aliyah l'mayla v'chala atzarach and everything. The second one from the bottom, yoshev b'bayis at achtoin, zel loy nena v'zel echasa. So this guy is not nena, because he's not living in v'zel echasa. Who loy nena shari aliyasai muchenes loy. He's not having hana. Why? Because he could live in the top bunk. Guys, what's the lumdus over here? Outside. According to Rabbi Yehuda, if I build the bottom and without the top, I'm having hana. And even though the other guy's not chasa because he didn't want to build it. Rabbi Yehuda says zen and chasa is no good. So what's his eitzah? Build both. What do I gain by building both? Then if I live below, I'm not having hana. You know why I'm not having hana? Because I can live above. I don't need your bottom. I have my top. That's why you gain by both. So it says Rashi, the guy, the Balaliyah who's living now in the attic is not having hana. Why? Well, it's there ready for him to live in. The because he didn't want to pay in the first place. Like they have like money because he didn't build it. That's the eitzah of Rabbi Yehuda. That's the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda, and he sits in achitim leisitziyasav until he gives him his wages, until he gives him his expenditures. Amid base. Rabbi Yehuda. The shloisha mekaymos in 3 places. Shanu la Rabbi Yehuda. Asl adam sheyahanim imayim chaveiroi. It's also to have enough from your friend. Says Rashi, shaloi b'matana, achetehei what? Achetehei midas noicha. Just 1 second, I have to. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, so now 3 places, Rabbi Yochanan said that you can't have hana from your friend, even with das. The guy knows you're living there, you're having hana, that you can't have hana. You can't have hana, even though the guy didn't give it to you matana. This is the classic case over here. You're living, Rabbi Yehuda said, you're living in the house that you built for him. It's no sweat off his back because he didn't pay a dime for it. But nonetheless, Rabbi Yehuda says it's no go. You have to build the aliyah as well. So this is number 1. Rabbi Yehuda also the Mishnah we just learned, guys, where he required you to build 2 houses to make it a case of zeloy nena v'zeloy chaser. He had to make it a case of zeloy nena v'zeloy chaser, because zen nena v'zeloy chaser would be pater, and would be chayiv. Idach hadet nan. Now we know this Mishnah because we've had it umpteen times. Hanoisin semer litzaba. Someone gives wool to a dyer litzvayolei edoim to go ahead and dye it red. Utzva shachar, he dyes it black. Shachar b'tzvay edoim, black and dyes it red. Red may, I think they said the red and black and red. Red mayoim and noisim l'demeit simlay. Why do we know, guys? Why do we know? Red mayo, he's a goslin. Shinoi koina. Now he just has to pay him for the value of what he stole. Kain shagazal, and he keeps the shvach. That was Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda said yadu al tachtoina. Rabbi Yehuda omer im hashvach yeser al hitzah. If the improvements are less than the shvach, Nice Yitzia, give him the improvements. The Metzia, Yiseres Shvach, nice Shvach. In other words, you keep the wool, and you give the dyer has the lower hand. If it's the expenditures were more, he gets the price of it can be sold for. If the price was sold for is more, then he gets his expenditures. Now, what does this have to do with having hana? What does it have to do with? So Rashi says that he's having hana, the fact that who schlepped it to this wool and took it to the dyer, this other guy, right? So you can't have. So Rabbi Yehuda's of the opinion that this Goslin took it and schlepped it over there. You can't have enough from it. Why? Because he schlepped it. Because that'd be a case of zenena. You having enough. The idach, the third place, maihi ditnan. Okay, here's the case outside. You pay your friend. You owe $1,000. You pay $500. You owe $500. The star says 1,000. You give it to a third party. You give it to a third party, and you tell the third party, listen, watch the star until I pay him up. And if I don't pay him up, give him back the star. Now, when you give him back the star, he's going to be able to collect the other 500, the other 1,000. He can collect the full 1,000 because he has a star. So in this case, Rabbi Yehuda says we don't do it. You paid off part of your chayv. In this case, it was 1,000. You paid off 500. The hishlish shtaroi, and you went ahead and you were mashlish the star. You went ahead and you gave it to a third party. But Amar lo, you told him, if I don't pay you the other 500 from this day until a certain time, he tells the shlish, the third party, then give it to the malva. He gives man. What happens if it comes to the time and he doesn't give it? You give the star to the malva. Rabbi Yehuda says you don't give it, since you didn't give it wholeheartedly, since you didn't give it with your full heart, right? Therefore, it's us that have anah. So these are three places where money is apparently on the table for a person, and Rabbi Yehuda says no. Our Mishnah, by living in the single house, he required a double house. The case of Noisin Simai, where he felt the guy schlepped, and you're making money off the fact that he schlepped the Goslin. And this case over here, where he really didn't mean it. He was give it. Now, obviously, we could say different svaris over here that the Gemara is going to do it right now. That one has nothing to do with the other. It says the Gemara, Mimai. How do you know you can't have enough from the money of your friend? Maybe, guys, we saw this in Bava Kama. Remember, when you live in a house, the walls get black. So it's not zenen v'zelei chaser, it's zenen v'zeh chaser. Living in a house causes the right. We had the other opinion was living in the house, you'll see the improvements of the house. We saw another opinion, there was a shade called Shia who knocks the house around. So by living it there, right, you're being chaser. So by living there, you're being chaser because you're blackening the walls, you're using an oven. So in other words, if it was the case of zenen v'zelei chaser, you'd have a riot to Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe as far Rabbi Yehuda it's a case of zeh chaser, because you're ruining his house, because the walls are getting black. Inami, it's mishum become mishana, because he didn't listen, the dyer didn't listen. The Tanana we learned in the Mishnah, kol mishana yadi al tachtaina. It has nothing to do with schlepping, right? That you could have enough from schlepping. This guy is on the lower end, not because you want to have enough from him, it's because he didn't listen, he didn't do the job what he was supposed to do, and kol mishana yadi al tachtaina. Right? When this guy gave the star, he paid 500, he gave a star of 1,000, says, and if I don't pay it by this day, guess what? Give him what? I'm going to pay, then give him the star back and collect the whole thing. Did he really mean this? Of course not. By now, even going through this Masechta, fellas, we have a good handle on what an asmachta is. You don't really mean it. So maybe that's the reason, but it had nothing to do with what being nenem and mamachavero. Right? You're not kind. So therefore, these three things perhaps have nothing to do with each other. It has nothing to do necessarily with being makbid the money. It could be three different reasons. Either because zenen v'zeh chaser, or in the case of what it's mishana from what you're supposed to do, or a case of what it's smachta. Or a case of it's not smachta. Okay, we're joined by Rav Avi. Rav Avi, we're learning Lila Nishmas Rev Ruvain Ben Yeshua, and we're up to Lamed. We're up to Kuf Yud Zayin on the base, parallel to the Taisvis in Meshvach Yes Al Yitzia. Okay, a little bit above that. So Amar Rav Acha Bar Ada Mishmei Deula. But let's say the house was made, guys, and I'm not going to get into the specifics, but we're going to discuss different types of bricks. Some are wider than others, and believe it or not, on that it's like the first blot in Baba Basra. So we'll give it its due we'll give it its due when we get there. But needless to say, the following: if the guy in the bottom wants to build with thicker bricks, it's not a problem. If the guy on top wants to build with thicker bricks, then it's a problem because it's going to cause more weight. So now they agreed to rebuild the structure together. And the guy in below wants to he wants to change the house, right? Big Vil, if he wants to use stones that were not chiseled down, so they're wider, then he could use them because it's going to make for a better base. Because this, but he wants to use chiseled stones when initially there was unchiseled stones, then ain't shomalo, because it's going to be less secure base because the stones are not as wide. If he wants to use shomaloi, he wants to build a wall with half bricks, right? Then we're going to see this like 6 tvachim. But levein means shomaloi, because again, this is going to be levein will be smaller than ksifim half bricks. L'sachik ba'arozim shomaloi. If he wants to make a ceiling out of cedar wood, which is a better than sycamore wood, then we listen to him. If he wants to use sycamore wood, we don't. These are all changing from the original structure. He wants to go ahead and make less windows. With the more windows, the less sturdy the structure. Again, in those days, they weren't using Andersons, right? You think about our days where you're so happy with the window. No, in those days, they wanted closed walls. Anyway, so you listen to him if you want to make less windows. He wants to raise the height of his apartment. He wants to raise it a little bit higher. Then we don't listen to him. Lamayit, he makes it a little smaller than Shaiman Loy. Now the exact opposite, we're going from the Elyon. Elyon Shabal Shanois, Begazis, Shaiman Loy, he wants to use the thinner stone, the thinnest cut stone. Then we listen to him. Big Vil, he wants to use what? Heavier stones that were not cut. Ain't Shaiman Loy. Chsifim, ain't Shaiman Loy. If he wants to use the heavier bricks, we don't use it to him because half bricks is make a thicker wall. Ilvainim Shaiman Loy. By Razam, if he wants to use what? Thicker wood, ain't Shaiman Loy. The Shikma Shaiman Loy. The Rabbis Bechalonis, he wants to make more windows, we listen to him. Lamai Bechalonis, if he wants to go ahead what? And make less windows, ain't Shaiman Loy. Like Bia ain't Shaiman Loy. If he wants to make it higher, we don't listen. Lamai to minimize the top, there'll be a smaller space with us. Let's say that it's so poor, they don't have what to go ahead and build the house, and they have to sell the land. The question is, how do we make the break in the land? What's the percentage? So it says the Gemara, Tanya, Reb Nassan says, the person who took the apartment below, he takes 2/3. The Elyon Shlish, and the guy of the Balaliyah, he takes what? He takes what? A third. Tachtoin, Acherim is always Metzia. Acherim Oimer, Tachtoin Noitel Shleisha Chalakim. The Tachtoin takes what? 3 Chalakim. He takes 3/4. And Ve'elyon Noitin Revia. So everyone agrees that the lower person gets more. Amarabba, Nakid Biyadcha, that the lower person gets 2/3. The Dayan who, because Rav Nassan is the Dayan. The Noiches Loim Kedadina, and Rav Nachman, he gets to the bottom line. He gets to the bottom line. When you go ahead, if you have a single house, you don't have any pressure from above. Good. When you have an attic, it's pushing down on it. How much does that attic detract from the single house? And the answer is tilsa. It takes away 1/3 of its lifespan. If you didn't have it, it would last 1/3 life longer. Since it's there, this is what it means. By having the duplex, it's going to take away what? 1/3 more. In that case, therefore, it's going to take away 1/3 of its life. Hilkach islay tilsa. Therefore, what? The guy who gets above only gets 1/3. The guy who gets above only gets 1/3.